Ethan Klein during this debate, like, brought up Iraqi Jews, and what he tried to claim that every Jew in Arab countries was expelled. Like, he tried to claim that there was a mass uniform expulsion of all Jews that was like coordinated, like a tit-for-tat thing with the Nakba. And he went on about this for a very long time. I'm not going to play the clips because it was just him rambling with ChatGPT. Like, he asked ChatGPT, give me Zionist talking points to justify the Nakba, and he just started reading from it as if they were his own words. This is who Ethan Klein is. However, I am going to address the broad strokes of his argument. He was basically saying, he's focused particularly on Iraq. He was like, no, it's wrong to say that there was a mix of expulsions and oppression and also people migrating voluntarily, which isn't true. Obviously, there was a mix. There were expulsions and there were also people who migrated voluntarily, also people who were just sort of forced out by racist laws. Nonetheless, even if every single Arab Jew was actually expelled, let's think about that for a second. Would that justify the Nakba? Here's the thing, okay? The Nakba happens first. What happened to the Jews as a reprisal for that in other countries in the Middle East was afterwards. So we have a bit of an issue there, right? The argument this was some sort of tit-for-tat thing, that with one cancelling out the other, doesn't really make much sense, given that the thing that you're trying to defend, the foundation of Israel, is what instigated it in the first place. No Nakba, no unilateral Israeli declaration of independence, none of that stuff would have happened in response. That's the first thing. The second thing, very simple here, is Palestine is not Iraq. Palestine is not these other countries that they always invoke. Palestine is a different fucking place. Did you know that? Ethan Klein's entire argument, and I will play a clip where he claimed that basically he said the fucking Arabs, he called them. Could you fucking imagine his head exploding if someone said the fucking Jews? He said the fucking Arabs, according to him, forced the Jews to become Zionists. Basically, what he's saying is, the Israeli colonization of Palestine, which began fucking 50, 60 years earlier, was retroactively justified by expulsions in other Middle Eastern countries.
It's not about what was allowed or not. The Arabs created 1 million Zionists because they're anti-Semitic.
The Arabs are anti-Semitic.
After the War of 1948 and fucking...
The War of 1948. You notice how he never calls it the fucking Nakba? It's always a war. There was no fucking war. It was literally a fucking expulsion, a pre-planned mass massacre and expulsion.
100,000 were forced to become Zionists, not by choice, but because they were forced out. The vast majority went to the fucking Arabs.
The fucking Arabs, he says. There it is. Okay, so let's talk about this narrative, as I was just saying. So, according to him, the fucking Arabs forced them to become Zionists. Okay, let's ask a simple question here. I'm going to pretend, for the sake of argument, even though it's untrue, that every single Jew who left any Middle Eastern country during this time was forced out by anti-Semitic fucking Arabs, as Ethan Klein said. Okay? Let's pretend that's true. Does that then justify them moving to Palestine, into a Palestinian house, murdering Palestinians, expelling them from their land, genociding them? Does it? We can answer this question very simply with a thought experiment. Let's imagine what Ethan Klein would think if the Palestinians tomorrow broke out of the prisons that Israel kills them in, massacred the Israelis, forced the survivors into the sea or into a neighboring country or whatever, and move back into their houses. Would Ethan Klein think that was justified? Now, this is not the same situation, by the way, because Palestine is not Iraq, Palestine is not Morocco, Palestine is not Yemen or any of these other countries that Ethan Klein is trying to say expelled every Jew ever. This is much more direct. This would be the Palestinians directly retaliating against their oppressors, not going to colonize a totally unrelated people in response to them being oppressed. So this would be way more justified than that. But does Ethan think that's okay? Would Ethan be for that? He thinks the Nakba is justified because Jews were expelled from other countries and thus they have some sort of divine right as a result of that to then go and do way worse than what was done to them to Palestinians. That's his logic here. Does that make any sense to you? It doesn't make any sense to me. And it doesn't make any sense at all because he clearly does not think that if Palestinians do it, it would be okay. Given his reaction to Palestinian retaliatory violence, given his reaction to basically anything that anyone does for Palestinians or that Palestinians do. In fact, Ethan Klein thinks that it would be reverse genocide if Palestinians actually broke out. We've all seen the clip of him saying that. He said that there can't be one state because the evil genocidal Palestinians could never be trusted to live alongside the Israelis. So clearly, he's very much not for what I said there. So we see a clear double standard here. And to be clear, these situations are not comparable because obviously Palestinians expelling the people who stole their own homes would be a whole lot more justified than Jews moving to a entirely different country and expelling the people who live there and taking their houses for themselves because they were expelled from a different country. And that shows the crux of this argument. This is a rhetorical trick. This is not a real argument. That's what you guys have to get here. This narrative of, oh, but there was a Jewish expulsion. They don't care about this. They don't care about it at all. If they cared about it, they would probably bring up the fact that in 1973, almost every single country that had expelled Jews or that had oppressed Jews offered complete return and full restitution of all assets to any Jew who came back. 1973, public and open invitations were duly issued by the governments of Morocco, Yemen, Libya, Sudan, and Iraq, which Ethan keeps fucking harping on, and Egypt for Arab Jews to return home, especially in light of the institutionalized Ashkenazi racist discrimination to which they had been subjected to in Israel. Neither Israel nor its Arab Jewish communities heeded its calls. So, there was a wrong done to Jews in the Arab world, in the Middle East. There were attempts to right this wrong around 20 years later. Clear and sincere attempts made to right this wrong. This kind of screws up the narrative, right? Because what ultimately happened is that Israel did not allow its citizens to heed this offer. What ultimately happened is that the Israelis themselves did not heed this offer because this is nothing but a rhetorical trick for them to minimize the Nakba and to justify the foundation of Israel. They don't give a shit about this. They're living large in Palestinian houses. They don't want to go back to their grandpa's house in Iraq. They don't give a shit. They have someone else's house to live in. There was also time where the Israeli government attempted to use the same rhetorical trick that Ethan Klein is using here. They only do this to minimize the Nakba. They only do this to justify the Nakba. They only do this to justify their oppression of Palestinians by saying, well, you were expelled. We were expelled too. Never mind the fact that you didn't expel us and we expelled you, so it's not exactly the same thing, and it wouldn't justify it anyway, but somehow it justifies it. There's a great article about a relatively niche historical thing that I want to talk about. So in the 1980s, with the PLO constantly talking about the right of return and the Nakba and the right of return for Palestinians becoming more and more of an issue in the global sphere, Israel formed a government organization specifically to press claims of expelled Jews from Arab countries. The reason why they did this was only as a tit-for-tat thing to try and delegitimize the Palestinian claim by saying, well, it happened to us too, therefore it's okay that we did it to you. This organization was called WOJAC. This organization was propped up by support from the Israeli government for the purpose of forming this narrative of tit-for-tat expulsions. Basically, what happened is in the 1970s, the PLO started talking more about the right of return, and this was a retaliatory thing. So they formed this organization, which was called the acronym was the World Organization of Jews from Arab Countries. And this organization, while it was nominally independent, it relied a ton on funding from the Israeli government. Basically, without the Israeli government, it couldn't have existed. It was founded literally by the vice chair of the Knesset at the time. Throughout its existence, the organization was supported by the Foreign Ministry and the Jewish Agency. This is a quote from this article. Despite its support of WOJAC, the Israeli government was less than enthusiastic about the establishment of the organization. The Israeli government was troubled primarily because the organization was established at a gathering that included the representatives of associations of Jewish immigrants from Arab countries. Despite these minor misgivings, it was generally accepted that WOJAC had been established as a tool to assist the state of Israel and the Israeli foreign ministry in the national arena. They argued that the state of Israel had not made effective use in the past of Jews from Arab countries. Notice like they need to use them. They're like a tool for propaganda for them. This is exactly how Ethan Klein uses Arab Jews, and argued that this was instrumental in the political arena in which Israel was active. And this is the thesis. This is where this entire Zionist argument comes from, literally from this organization. These are the primary theses that they aim to spread to offset the main three claims of the Palestinian national movement. One is of the historical nature of a Jewish national and religious presence in the Middle East. Two, that the Middle East had witnessed a de facto mutual population exchange of Arab refugees and Jewish refugees. And three, that the property of these Arabs and Jews could be counterbalanced due to the population exchange. So the idea was, yeah, we expelled the Palestinians, but you expelled the Jews. Those cancel each other out. And then, ergo, okay, we took your property, but in those other Arab countries, they took the property of these Jews, and those also cancel each other out. Therefore, the Palestinian right of return is illegitimate. That's the entire point of this. So what happened with Wojak is that it was very transparently an Israeli state organization that was not founded of any sort of honesty. It was founded rather as a means of pushing against the Palestinian right of return. Because the Arab governments were incredibly open at this time to talking individually with any claimant to stolen Jewish property in the Middle Eastern countries. So what the Israeli government made this organization do is it specifically acted as if all Jewish assets were one. It tried to prohibit anyone from negotiating on an individual basis. The article says here, they forestalled any possibility of individual claims for compensation and made use of the assets of Jews from Arab countries if they were state property at the disposal of the state of Israel. According to this theory, the submission of private property claims of individuals to the Egyptian government would weaken the state in future negotiations with Palestinians. When Wojak demanded compensation for the property of Jews from Arab countries, it did not mean the monetary compensation of Jews from Arab countries themselves. It was advancing rather a demand for rights to this property in order to use them to counterbalance claims made by Palestinian refugees against Israel. In the words of the attorney of the organization, we believe that the day will come where the sides will sit down to discuss the claims of refugees and Arabs that were displaced in a practical, decisive manner. A counterclaim for property in the Arab countries will already exist as a sort of counterbalance that will be there when the time comes to meet. This is really the essence of this talking point. It was carefully crafted by the Israeli state in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. This is where Ethan Klein gets it from. Obviously, he doesn't know where he gets it from, but this is where it comes from. Because previously, Israelis were didn't want to be known as a nation of refugees. This is a new thing that they only pretend to care about in order to delegitimize the Palestinian right of return, because for them, refugees are weak. It is not desirable to be a refugee. And you can see how incredibly disingenuous this organization was, because one of the main reasons why it ended up being disbanded, because the Israeli state withdrew funding from it, is because some of the people who Ethan Klein tokenizes began making claims individually. So Ethan Klein loves to talk about Algeria, for example. And French Jews who were from Algeria who were members of this organization, they were originally allowed in it just because, you couldn't exclude 1 million fucking people without making it clear what you were doing, right? So it was like a strategy. And French Jews said, or one of these French Jews said, we have a problem that there are close to 1 million Jews from Arab countries who live outside of the state of Israel. Some of them came to Israel and then left the country and even gave up their Israeli citizenship. Others went directly, like the Algerians who all went to France. These people also have rights, and the state of Israel cannot control this issue. So basically, the second that, for example, French Jews who were members of this organization started using it to try and push their own personal claims in Algeria, rather than just using this as a tool to try to legitimize the Nakba and delegitimize the Palestinian right of return, the organization was basically destroyed by the Israeli state literally within a year. So the very origin of this whole bringing up Iraq and stuff, it is an explicit justification of the Nakba, even taken on its own terms, even ignoring the fact that the supposed factual basis of it is false. Even if the factual basis was true, it would not justify it. And it's obvious that these people don't believe that, because when you think about their logic, that would justify the Palestinians doing basically whatever they want to the Israelis and taking their homes back, but they don't believe that, do they? No one in Israel cares about this, okay? No one genuinely cares about this. None of them want their grandpa's house back. None of them want to go and live in other Middle Eastern countries. On the flip side, the Palestinians do want their land and homes back, and they do want to go and live in their own homes, in their own land, in Palestine. Bringing this up is pure diversion, deflection. It's simply an attempt to justify the Nakba. Nothing more, nothing less. And Ethan Klein reading off talking points from fucking ChatGPT could not be a better example of it. There's no reason to just randomly start talking about Iraqi Jews in fucking 1950, unless you're trying to justify something in the present. Either the genocidal Israeli state of Israel, or the genocide, whatever it may be, there's simply no reason to start talking about that otherwise. And talking about fucking trauma, and she was like, you're denying Jewish trauma. That was a fucking great moment, wasn't it? Let's check that out. I believe he invoked the word trauma numerous times.
Whether it is comparable to say the Nakba and the 900,000 Jews that left
I'm not defending
from
the Nakba.
Separate countries.
The whole fucking point is to defend the Nakba.
He would laugh at you.
Your failure to acknowledge the trauma of both groups.
This guy is just fucking invoking standpoint epistemology here.
Don't understand.
Is the reason why you are a radical fucking propagandist liar. Both trauma needs to be acknowledged by both groups. There's two things that need to be true for this ever to be resolved peacefully.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Palestinian self-determination and the Israelis' right to have secure borders.
You see this invocation of trauma right? So you get to do genocide against Palestinians basically forever because your grandpa was expelled from Iraq. So we have like the genocider and the genocided, but because one of them has a grandpa who was expelled from Iraq, you have to acknowledge the trauma. You have to treat them as basically like equally aggrieved. And also, like, we need to give the genocider secure borders, and we somehow need Palestinian self-determination, you know, the thing that is literally impeded by the very fact that these people moved there and expelled and genocided the Palestinians and stole their country. These are illogical positions. They don't make any sense together. It's nothing but like fucking liberal therapy speak. Standpoint epistemology. Invoking fucking Jewish trauma or whatever in the context of a Jewish supremacist state founded by Jews for Jews at the expense of another group of people entirely who they are systematically, have been, always have been, and currently are systematically attempting to expel and genocide from their land to take it from themselves for their own benefit is fucking insane. Jews in Israel are in a position of immense racial power and privilege that they have given themselves to invoke some sort of idea of trauma because of something that happened 80 years ago to them that therefore justifies this is absolute fucking insanity. You can't say that you support Palestinian self-determination and then a second later say that these genociders, these people in an ethnic supremacist state need security and safe borders or whatever. Why do they need security and safe borders exactly? How does that make any fucking sense? Them even having this so-called borders comes at the cost of Palestinians in the first place. Why would they need security? Because the Palestinians fight back against them? Because they fight back against the ethnic supremacist regime that they've imposed upon them? Because they fight to get their land back? This is like saying that the fucking Nazi settlers in Poland need security. They need secure borders. Because, you know, the fucking Jewish partisans are fighting back. They're attacking the farms they stole. It's an insane argument to make. Fuck you invoking trauma in genocide. What a fucking joke, man. What a total fucking joke. The equation here of Israelis with Palestinians when the very issue here is a fucking Jewish supremacist, a racial, ethnic, religious, Jewish supremacist state oppressing Palestinians on the basis of them not being of the Jewish ethnic group, the Jewish racial group, the Jewish religious group. That's the fundamental problem. You can't fucking handwave that away by claiming some sort of innate generational trauma and then going on to say, oh, you're not acknowledging the trauma of both sides. Both sides. There's no both sides here. One side is the literal fucking modern Nazi Germany. That's all. Like, the solution to the fucking Israeli racial supremacist state genociding Palestinians is for us to acknowledge the humanity of the fucking Israelis? That's your argument? Oh my God. If only we acknowledged the humanity of the Germans, everything would have been fine. The problem here is not, you're not acknowledging the humanity of the Israelis. If only we acknowledge the humanity of the Israelis, the problem would end. If we acknowledge the trauma of the Israelis, the problem would end. No, it fucking wouldn't. The problem here is that Israel is a Jewish ethnic supremacist state that wants to fucking genocide and ethnically cleanse all Palestinians and take their land for themselves for the benefit of people they consider to be Jewish, they consider to be of their in-group. That's the problem. If we acknowledged Jewish trauma tomorrow, if we said, it's so traumatic what happened to your grandpa, that wouldn't fucking change anything. They'd still want to genocide them and ethnically cleanse them, you dumb motherfucker. The problem here is a lack of definitive action in terms of boycotts, sanctions, blockades, military action against Israel. It's not a lack of acknowledging the poor trauma of the fucking eternal victims in Israel who are still somehow victims even as they fucking massacre Palestinians every day and 97% of them fucking support that massacre.